that, but here we have, and now in science,
that polonium halos could have formed only if the host rocks underwent a rapid crystallization renders exceedingly difficult, in my estimation, the prospect of explaining these halos by physical laws as presently understood. In other words, they don't fit the current evolutionary model.
Not only that, don't fit, but here is something, it's demanding a new paradigm, a new explanation. And guess what's happened? Go ahead, another one.
It is also apparent that polonium halos do pose contradictions to currently held views of Earth history. Massive understatements, as you can see. I mean, these are understatements by a mile. But that's the most powerful, or that's the strongest language that these scientific journals would allow. They're not going to allow him to say, "And I believe God created the Earth," in 6 literal days.
It's interesting to see, at this particular point in time, I had been a guest scientist there at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory filled with people of all persuasions, atheists, agnostics, and whatever. And the management of the laboratory saw me taking these papers going in for publication, and they saw them being accepted, and they saw them being published, and they were wondering, what in the world is going to happen? This man is out there saying these things like this. This was not being done in a vacuum. This is one of the world's elite scientific journals. And they're wondering, they look at me, I was only going to be there supposedly for 1 year as a guest scientist, then the 2nd year, then the 3rd year, then the 4th year, and then the 5th year, and on. And this paper was going in and in saying things like that, that made things shake and rattle there a little bit at the laboratory. But they kept me on. Why? Because there was no one in the scientific community that was refuting any of this. Over and over again, the statements were being made stronger and stronger, and the evidence was growing and growing and growing, and I was still there. So, David, what was the reaction of the scientific community to these reports and conclusions? What was it?
This actually came from a publication that was reviewing the evidence for creation, and they basically made these points. Current physical laws may not have governed the past. Earth's primordial crustal rocks, rather than cooling and solidifying over millions of years, crystallized almost instantaneously. Some geological formations thought to be 100 million years old are in reality only several thousand years old.
Let me give a little background to this. There's a research communications network actually got busy. When they saw my papers coming out as they were, and they saw them being unchallenged, they took it upon themselves, without my knowledge, to send letters to some of the world's prominent scientists, Nobel laureates, in fact, asking them their opinion, their understanding, their comprehension of these papers that are appearing in the scientific journals. They got letters back from a number of these prominent scientists, including Nobel laureates, and they then published this sort of summary and sent it out everywhere about the radiohalos and the implications. And this is what Dave is going to continue now. We're going to pick out one of the responses from those letters in this organization's magazine report.
Grant these propositions, and any researcher will tell you the entire structure of the historical natural sciences would dissolve into formlessness. Few certainties would remain. Yet these possibilities, and others equally disintegrative, have been published over the past several years in the world's foremost scientific journals, Nature, Science, Annual Review of Nuclear Science, among others. One of the reviewers that was actually one of the scientists that this Research Communications Network actually asked to comment on the polonium halo research said the following: Gentry's conclusions are startling and shake the foundations of radiochemistry and geochemistry. Yet he has been so meticulous in his experimental work, so restrained in his interpretations, that most people take his work seriously. I think most people believe, as I do, that some unspectacular explanation will eventually be found for the anomalous halos, and that orthodoxy will turn out to be right after all. Meanwhile, Gentry should be encouraged to keep rattling this skeleton in our closet for all it is worth. Professor Edward Anders from the University of Chicago.
One of the world's preeminent geochemists at that particular time. So here tonight we're still trying to rattle that skeleton, and there's more. Remember, at the Arkansas creation trial, Dr. Dalrymple, the geologist, called the polonium halos a very tiny mystery. It's important for us to know the answer I think it's important to know what the answer to that little mystery is. That's what Dalrymple said. Did he later say anything else about it? Yes, he did. In 1992 and 95, in fundraising letters that were sent out for the Pro-Evolution National Center for Science Education. Let me just give you a background before we get into that. I'm a member of the American Geophysical Union. These letters were sent to me because I'm a member of the AGU. But it was under the letterhead of the National Center, Pro-Evolution National Center for Science Education. Anyway, I saw it. I saw the letter that first came, and I thought, well, this is from the National Center of Science Education, Pro-Evolution. I'm not interested, so I'm just going to throw it away. Fortunately, David and Pat rescued it, and they read it, and they showed it to me. And are we ever thankful?
Well, you just have to kind of take the, think about the setting here. You get junk mail in the mailbox all the time. And, how often do you really read junk mail? I mean, not too often. I mean, normally you just throw it away. But in this one case, I thought it would just kind of be funny to see what exactly the National Center for Science Education was trying to tell us. I thought this might be interesting, And it just so happens that in the process of reading this random letter that was sent as a fundraising letter, we happened to come along this very interesting phrase embedded in the letter. Basically, we'll start out by telling you what it says at the beginning. Dear fellow AGU member, I'm writing to tell you about the National Center for Science Education, an organization of scientists that defends what? Rational science education. That would be opposed to irrational science education, which would be, something that would include creation. Now, the problem, and this is a serious problem, is the fundamentalist opposition to evolution. I know it's hard to believe that evolution can still be a problem in 1992, the time the letter was written, but the opposition to evolution throughout the U.S. and Canada has actually increased during the last year. The movement, this is where it got interesting, the movement called scientific creationism is composed of biblical literalists who claim to have scientific evidence that the world was created all at one time, only a few thousand years ago. Some of our colleagues think that the scientific creationism movement can be ignored, but I think they're wrong. The movement is beginning to affect some college classes too, as members of Genesis clubs enter classrooms with disruptive and difficult to answer questions. How would you answer a student who announced in your class that the second law of thermodynamics doesn't permit evolution, or that the presence of polonium halos in granite demonstrates that granite had to have formed suddenly, i.e. was specially created? I don't know where he got the stories. I would have given really just about anything to have been in some of those classrooms where these random students might have said these things. And the expression on the teacher's face when they said it. Because in all probability, the college professor probably had never heard of polonium halos. And so when somebody says from the audience, yeah, but what about polonium halos? Doesn't that mean the earth was specially created? He was probably like, what are you talking about? Of course, when you actually look into it, it's actually true. So anybody in the class that actually looked into it, would have come back and said, yeah, that guy knew what he was talking about. There's actually stuff that says that. And so, all this actually got back to guess who? Brent Dalrymple. Brent Dalrymple is the one that wrote this letter. He, above anybody else, knows about the polonium halos. Why? Because he was at the Arkansas creation trial, and he is the one who knew very well the implications of what the polonium halos meant. And furthermore, he said, and I think it's important to know what the answer to that little mystery is. 1981. Fast forward to 1992, still did not have an answer to that little mystery. Don't you think that if he had known or figured out by that time what the answer to that little mystery was, that he would have shared it with all the members of the American Geophysical Union? It makes sense. If there was some naturalistic, he could have said very easily, well, you know what? Here's the answer that you need to give to these students in your classrooms that talk about polonium halos. What you say is you say that the polonium is secondary, derived from uranium, and on and on and on and on. But he doesn't say any of that. He poses the question as a very thought-provoking question saying, this is a problem. We have people announcing in classrooms saying polonium halos demonstrates granite was formed suddenly. And the second law of thermodynamics doesn't permit evolution. So I think it's interesting to note that the same person that in the trial, the Arkansas trial, said, you know, this is something that can be solved, I want to know what the answer is, really doesn't have the answer years later. And in fact, you know, that was 1992. Fast forward another 15 years.
No, 3 years, 1995.
Well, 1995, but I'm just saying in 1995 he rewrites the letter. You can see here in 1995 he writes the same letter. It's essentially the same thing, except he says, how would you answer a student who claims that the presence of polonium halos in granite demonstrates that granite had to form suddenly, i.e. was specially created? In this particular letter, he leaves out the part that talks about the second law of thermodynamics. But in essence, it's the same letter, you know, 3 years later. So after the first letter goes out, the second letter comes out, there's really no answer forthcoming. And now, obviously, you know, we're 14 years down the road from that letter. So the answer really is not forthcoming, because the answer, the true answer is that God left his fingerprints in the rocks to help establish faith in the inspired Word of God, the Bible, for those that are interested.
Let's focus on that as well as you have done there. The fact of the matter is, twice it went out to the 30,000 member American Geophysical Union, and there's a SOS, fellows, help me, help us all. You got students running around here and telling their teachers and everybody else, you got scientific evidence for creation. And that second one, David and I...
In fact, you know, we might even need to form some Genesis clubs around here. So, you know, I think that this might be something that would be useful in just about any college classroom that you can think of.
Yes, I would agree. But anyway, it would cause an uproar. It would cause an uproar if there was a Genesis...
But they're valid questions, so it's not something that, you know, it's a valid question.
All right, let's continue. That was 1995. Brent Dalrymple wrote this huge book, The Age of the Earth. In 1991, did he mention anything about this tiny mystery and the polonium halos at all? No. Then he wrote another book, 2004, Stanford University Press. Did he write anything about the polonium halos in that book? No. I was in touch with Brent Dalrymple over this period of time, because in the year 2000, he edited an issue of the book of the magazine called GeoTimes, a monthly magazine of the American Geological Institute, just evolution, 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 evolution. And so I called him. I've been friends with him. I told him, I said, Brent, if the day ever comes when you decide to be a Christian, call me. I want to help you. I'm on good terms with the man. But anyway, at that particular time, because this GeoTimes article was coming out and had come out in 2000, December, I said, and the editor won't let me write anything, I said, Brent, help me. Get in touch with the publisher, Sam Adams. I want to write at least a little letter here in response to what you have said. And this man says, okay, I'll do that. And so in the March issue, 2001 issue of GeoTimes, I've got a letter in there. And that letter basically reiterates, let me see if I can get the pointer up here. Can't see it very well. Can't see it at all. Anyway, that letter refers to the letters that we just referred to, that Brent Dalrymple on 2 occasions said, you know, what are we going to do about this polonium halo for evidence for fiat creation, quoting it, and now bringing it out within the magazine itself. GeoTimes goes to another 10, 20,000 geologists now. They see that indeed Brent Dalrymple has got an SOS, and this is a mystery that is unsolved, and they see clearly what the implications have to be, because Brent Dalrymple himself is saying fiat creation, fiat creation, fiat creation. What are we going to do if we can't solve the problem? So, as we continue then, thousands of geologists saw the letter, no answer was forthcoming. So it's all over with the theory of a naturalistic origin of granite and an anciently evolving earth. That's where we continue. In the beginning, Lord, you laid the foundations of the earth. The heavens are the work of your hands. Now, he spake and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. So, what scientific impact do polonium and uranium halos and the granites have on the age of the earth? David, that's what we want to take up now. In the age of the earth, the whole idea of the age of the earth being old is simply because geologists will go out and take rocks such as the granites, and they'll measure the amount of uranium in the rock, and then they'll measure the end product of the uranium